Parasites need to be sanitized, Jonas said as he poured beer on me. Good for you. All cleaned up. My mother-in-law laughed as she saw me soaking wet. I had reached my breaking point. Are you ready for this, Jonas? When I asked Jonas, for some reason, my father-in-law retorted. Don't get cocky when you can't do anything right. Well then, I'll stop sending money home, I said, and in that instant, the expressions on my in-laws and Jonas's faces stiffened. Huh? What do you mean? The money I send is my own. I pressed on, confusing Jonas. I mean, I'm gonna divorce you. I declared this in front of the relatives. I was planning to divorce him soon anyway. If so, I might as well get divorced right here and now. But I don't intend to just get divorced and end it. I'll make sure to pay back double for the humiliation I've received. I'm prepared for that. Besides, opportunities always come unexpectedly. For me, now is the time. If I get divorced here, I feel like everything will go smoothly. Dear father-in-law, mother-in-law, and Jonas. Now it's your turn to taste humiliation. I immediately went to the room next to the entrance to get the bag containing the filled-out divorce papers. My name is Mirabelle Manson. Currently, I'm helping out at my family's tea business. But I'm not just doing it on the side. I'm a salaried employee. Also, being a housewife is my job too. By the way, my husband, Jonas, works at a general wholesale trading company. He seems to deal mainly with hotel amenities. But Jonas seems dissatisfied with his job. I could have been the boss by now. Jonas sometimes complains like that. There's a reason for that. Actually, Jonas's family used to run a hotel. However, that hotel went bankrupt years ago. Even now, in his mid-40s, Jonas might not have given up on the dream of running a hotel. On the other hand, my in-laws retired following the hotel's bankruptcy. I wonder who Jonas got his stubbornness from? He's not at the age to be dreaming anymore. I've started to think like that now that I'm 40. That aside, it's not easy just because the in-laws have retired. Because they rely entirely on us. They're unemployed, so their only income is their pension. They say that's not enough to live on and ask Jonas for financial help. Of course, I'd be willing to help within reason. But the incredibly audacious in-laws are not satisfied with just that. It's not uncommon for them to come into our house uninvited while I'm at work. They even go as far as eating the food in the fridge without asking. There was even a time they ordered food without permission. But, of course, I had to pay for it. As soon as I got home, the in-laws told me this. We told them you'd pay for it later. Hurry up and go. You're causing trouble for the store. Even though it's a store I know, I can't cause them trouble. Holding back what I wanted to say, I went to the store. But when I returned home after paying, the in-laws were already gone. All that was left in the room was a pile of trash. Standing in front of the messy room, I was stunned. Meanwhile, Jonas came home. As soon as Jonas entered the room, he raised his voice. What's with this room? I'm sorry. Your parents came over. I explained that the in-laws had come and helped themselves to food and drink in the house. This mess would make Jonas speak up to his parents. I thought so. But Jonas just sighed softly. Turning his back to me, he said, I'm gonna take a shower, so clean this up. What? Isn't there something else you should say? Jonas turned back at my words. He sighed again and continued. Look, dealing with my parents is also part of a wife's job, right? A wife's job, but they're your parents. I'm tired from work. Don't compare me with a woman who just helps out at her family's business. With that, Jonas quickly left the room. All I could do was stand there in shock. What's with that attitude? Like father, like son, I guess. Does he think of me as some kind of maid? In the end, I had no choice but to clean the room alone while grumbling about Jonas and his parents. Then, something crossed my mind. It was about how Jonas and I got married. In fact, the pushy in-laws were involved in the circumstances of our marriage. It all started when I was in my senior year of high school. While I was tending the tea shop, a woman appeared. A well-dressed woman in traditional attire. However, she had a frown on her face. Can I help you with something? As I spoke, the woman approached. After looking around the shop, she turned her gaze to me. Are you a part-time worker? I needed to talk about the next delivery. No, I'm the daughter of the owner. My father is out on an errand. I see. Well, then, please pass on the message. We're going to stop doing business with your family. The woman said that with a snide smile. That was my first encounter with my mother-in-law. Canceling the deal? What do you mean? It's none of your business. Adult circumstances. But, be quiet. You just do as you're told. My mother-in-law raised her voice. Then my father returned home. Oh, this is Mrs. Manson. What can I do for you? Good timing. Actually. Quickly grasping the situation, my father invited my mother-in-law inside. Then he ordered me to serve some high-quality tea. Is that rude customer really that important? Grumbling, I prepared the tea. I found out later that my mother-in-law was one of our valued customers. When her parents were running the hotel, our store's local premium tea was served there. In other words, just supplying tea to the hotel was quite profitable for us. So, you can imagine how panicked my father must have been when the deal was about to be cancelled. After my mother-in-law left, my father had a talk with me. Hey, Mirabelle. Would you consider going on a date? With whom? With the son who's set to inherit a nearby resort. This was what my father explained. My mother-in-law had proposed terminating the contract. It's a time when every business is thinking about cutting costs, so that's understandable. But losing the contract with the hotel would be a big blow to our tea shop. So, my mother-in-law made a proposal. It was an arranged date. She was looking for a bride for Jonas, the heir. If I married Jonas, they would continue the business with us. Of course, my father immediately refused. But my mother-in-law made this snide remark. Our hotel has a more stable future than your small tea shop. At that time, the hotel was doing well. It had many repeat customers and might have been thriving. I knew the hotel was prosperous. But my father must have understood it better. Concerned about my future, my father told my mother-in-law that he would talk to his daughter. So, meeting him would be fine, right? Is that okay, Mirabelle? I'm still in high school, and whether I'll marry him is another matter. But it's common to have arranged meetings with business associates. It wasn't unusual to be introduced to a potential marriage partner through business connections. I was a high school student at the time. I wasn't a child anymore, and I knew that much. Of course, I didn't like my mother-in-law's approach. Using the contract as leverage was downright unscrupulous. But just having the arranged meeting might make them reconsider the business deal. That was indeed part of my consideration. So, I accepted the arranged meeting. On the day, Jonas, who came for the meeting, was a nice person. I didn't sense the cunning or snideness I felt from my mother-in-law. Being involved in the accommodation business, he had a gentle and soft demeanor. He seemed like such a grown-up man. That's what I, still a high school student, mistakenly thought. So after graduating high school, I married Jonas. But it turned out to be a huge mistake. As soon as we got married, Jonas changed completely. You're going to be the manager someday, so do your job exactly as my mom says. But if I do everything your mom says, I can't get any housework done. Figure it out. That's what it means to be the wife of a future owner. Told by Jonas, I ended up being saddled with all sorts of chores at the hotel. Moreover, I wasn't allowed a single day off, and it was all for no pay. Huh? It's only natural for a daughter-in-law to help with the family business. Why do you need money? I don't have time for housework, so I thought about using a service. Don't be ridiculous. I never skimped on housework or my job. My mother-in-law just scolded me, leaving no room for discussion. I had no choice but to endure. Then one day, I happened to overhear my in-laws talking. I was returning to the office to take a break. Just as I was about to open the door, I heard my in-laws' voices from inside. This is bad. We'll go bankrupt at this rate. Isn't there somewhere we can get a loan? It felt awkward to enter right then. At that moment, the door suddenly opened, and my mother-in-law peeked out. What's up, Mirabelle? Oh! I was at a loss for words. Suddenly, my mother-in-law looked behind me. Hey! You shouldn't be here. I'm sorry. A child's voice responded. Turning around, I saw a middle school-aged girl. You're interrupting our work. Go back to your room. My mother-in-law raised her voice. The girl flinched, her eyes welling up with tears. Please stop. She's a child but still a guest. We don't have time for this. Take her away immediately. My mother-in-law closed the office door forcefully. I sighed and apologized to the girl. I'm sorry for startling you. It's my fault for entering uninvited. I'm sorry. It seems she wandered in while looking around the hotel. Okay, then I'll show you around. Let's head back to your room. Sarah Norman. Let's head back, Sarah. I guided Sarah back to the guest rooms, where her father was searching for her. I apologize for any trouble my daughter may have caused. Sarah looked downcast. No, it's fine. Oh, here. This is for you, Sarah. Is it cake? It's a financier I made. My family owns a tea shop. I was planning to eat it during my break, but giving it to her might bring back her smile. Sure enough, Sarah smiled, and I felt relieved as I returned to my work. After a while, just as my in-laws were discussing, the hotel went bankrupt. It's your fault we're drowning in debt. It's like we've brought a plague upon ourselves by marrying you. That's how the in-laws reproached me. Jonas also looked at me coldly. But it wasn't my fault. In fact, right after the bankruptcy was decided, a man offered to help. I owe it to that lady for taking care of my daughter. The man speaking in the office was Sarah's father. He was the president of a company that managed hotels and such. He decided to take over the management of the hotel, repaying the debts my in-laws had accumulated. He would rehire all the hotel's employees and even pay the wages that were overdue. However, he wouldn't rehire my in-laws, because their negligence was the cause of the bankruptcy. Meanwhile, he even took care of finding a new job for Jonas. That was because I earnestly begged him. I really appreciate it. With this, we might just make it. I thanked Sarah's father many times. Afterward, Jonas successfully found a new job. Although the in-laws became unemployed, they were of age to receive their pension. I thought we could manage if I worked at my family's business, but that turned out to be too optimistic. Initially, the in-laws lived quietly on their pension, but gradually they returned to their intrusive ways. Complaining to them was of no use, they wouldn't listen. In fact, they got even worse. I started to prepare for a divorce gradually. Then there was the time when they ordered delivery on my account. I couldn't stand it anymore and complained to the in-laws. And then, my mother-in-law responded with this. I'm sorry. I want to make amends, so come to our house with Jonas next Sunday. Before I knew it, more than 5 years had passed since the hotel's bankruptcy. I had been patient, but this was my last chance. Thinking that, I responded to my mother-in-law's call. On the day, after finishing my work, I headed to my in-laws' house. Upon arrival, there was a mountain of shoes at the entrance. I put my bag in a nearby room and headed to the living room. As soon as I entered the living room, I was shocked. A large group of relatives was making a racket. The reconciliation party has started. You're late, Mirabelle. Jonas, at the center of the commotion, called out to me. He was already drunk. You're already drunk? How much did you drink? Jonas and I had left the house together. And I had been working for about an hour. Jonas, on the other hand, should have come straight to his parents' house, so he had been drinking here for about an hour. How could he get this drunk in just an hour? As I was stunned by this, Jonas came closer to me. In the next moment, Jonas pointed a glass at me. We need to disinfect the parasites, he said as he poured beer over me. Good for you. All cleaned up. My mother-in-law laughed as she saw me soaking wet. I had reached my breaking point. Are you ready for this, Jonas? When I asked Jonas, for some reason, my father-in-law retorted. Don't get cocky when you can't do anything right. Well then, I'll stop sending money home, I said, and in that instant, the expressions on my in-laws and Jonas's faces stiffened. Huh? What do you mean? The money I send is my own. I pressed on, confusing Jonas. I mean, I'm gonna divorce you. I declared this in front of the relatives. I was planning to divorce him soon anyway. If so, I might as well get divorced right here and now. But I don't intend to just get divorced and end it. I'll make sure to pay back double for the humiliation I've received. I'm prepared for that. Besides, opportunities always come unexpectedly. For me, now is the time. If I get divorced here, I feel like everything will go smoothly. Dear father-in-law, mother-in-law, and Jonas. Now it's your turn to taste humiliation. I immediately went to the room next to the entrance to get the bag containing the filled-out divorce papers. I'm glad I brought it just in case, thinking that. I returned to where Jonas was.
Hey! Mirabelle? What about?
The discussion is over. Here, the divorce papers. I slammed the divorce papers in front of Jonas. At that moment, the noisy relatives went silent. In the hushed atmosphere, I looked at my in-laws and Jonas. Then I calmly told them. Sign it and bring it to my family home. Once I can confirm it, we'll start discussing alimony.
Hey, you're joking, right?
A joke? There's no way. I'm fed up with all of you. I looked back and forth between my in-laws and Jonas. Perhaps feeling overpowered by me, none of the relatives said a word. I took a deep breath and then stood up gracefully. After looking over everyone who was causing a commotion, I finally announced. Well, then, please take care of the burden that caused the hotel to go bankrupt yourselves. With that, I left my in-laws' house amidst the murmuring relatives. On my way, I stopped at a convenience store to buy a towel. Then, I went straight back to my parents' house. I explained the situation to my astonished father. After hearing my story, my father sighed deeply. What a mess. Sorry, Dad. You don't have to apologize. The circumstances are different now. Previously, my marriage was crucial for the continuation of our family business. But now, my in-laws no longer run a hotel. Even if I get divorced, there's no worry about our business being affected. I should have said no from the beginning. I really put you through a lot. No, what's important is that you'll continue to be on my side, right?
Of course.
Good. Then, I need a little help. I smiled. Then I shared a certain plan with my father. With my father's support secured, I waited for Jonas to bring the divorce papers. But no matter how long I waited, Jonas didn't show up. If that's the case, I'll arrange for a lawyer first. With that thought, I started looking for a lawyer specialized in divorce issues. Just after I found one and had a discussion, I returned home to find my father and Jonas arguing in front of the shop.
That's why I brought the divorce papers. And I have something to discuss with Mirabelle.
My usually gentle father was speaking in a harsh tone, seemingly following the plan I had laid out. Grinning, I approached Jonas. I called out to him from behind. So, you finally brought the divorce papers. I was getting tired of waiting.
Mirabelle! Where have you been?
It doesn't matter where I was. Do you have the divorce papers? As I reached out my hand, Jonas, turning away, handed me a brown envelope. I quickly checked the contents. Inside was the signed divorce papers. Just so you know, we'll handle the alimony through my lawyer. I was about to say. Jonas looked at me intently and reached out his hand. What?
Don't play dumb. The bank card, hand it over.
The bank card? As I tilted my head, Jonas raised his voice.
It's the card for my account, the one where my allowance is deposited.
I don't have it, though.
Don't lie. Who else would use it?
Jonas's loud voice made even passers-by turn their heads. Feeling embarrassed, I let Jonas into the house. We moved to the living room to continue our conversation. Here's what Jonas had to say. After I left the house, Jonas, in a drunken state, signed the divorce papers. But once he sobered up, he began to feel anxious. There was no infidelity or such faults on his part, but splashing beer on me in a bad joke wasn't a good move. He didn't think that a loan would lead to the breakdown of our marriage, but he was sure a lawyer would pursue it. And if it came to that, it would be somewhat disadvantageous for him. In addition, various other procedures would arise. The expenses would increase, and it would just be a hassle. So he was trying somehow to make me reconsider the divorce. That's when, while trying to come up with various schemes, he noticed at a store that the card he pulled from his wallet wasn't working. The card was a debit card, which directly withdraws from the account. Finding it strange, Jonas checked his account and realized it was empty.
This has never happened before. You must have stolen it in spite of deciding on the divorce.
I don't know what you're talking about. But I started to say when Jonas slammed the table.
If you're going to play these games, I won't pay a penny in alimony.
I grimaced instinctively. Then Jonas raised his voice even more.
If you want, we can take this to court. How about I sue you for theft since we're getting divorced?
Listen.
What now?
I really don't have your cash card. I just did what I said I would, I explained, causing Jonas to frown. After thinking for a bit, he asked me again.
What are you talking about? The allowance. I told you I was going to stop it, remember? And?
Jonas looked utterly confused. I couldn't help but think how clueless he was and spelled it out for him.
The allowance I mentioned includes you, too. What? An allowance for me?
Jonas asked back with a dumbfounded expression. The story goes back to right after the hotel went bankrupt. The in-laws became unemployed, and Jonas found a new job. However, the salary for Jonas, who was hired midway through his career, wasn't much. On top of that, we had to send money to the unemployed in-laws. So, I started working at my family's tea shop. Of course, as a full-time employee. I added the money I received from Jonas as an allowance to the money I sent to my in-laws as their allowance. Afterward, what remained of Jonas's salary became our living expenses. However, this meant Jonas's allowance was inevitably short. Having grown up as the pampered son of a manager, Jonas was quite reckless with money. So, I was covering Jonas's allowance with my salary.
Then, where does my salary go? It went to this month's living expenses. We broke up before I could transfer your allowance.
I hadn't transferred the allowance. That's why Jonas's card wasn't working.
What about my allowance going forward? If you budget well, you should manage, right? No way!
Jonas crumbled down. I smiled at him mischievously, holding up the divorce papers.
I've got the signed divorce papers now, so it's too late to not go through with it, I said in a gentle voice. Okay.
Eventually, Jonas left, shoulders slumped. After a while, I received numerous calls from my in-laws. I answered a few times, but both my mother-in-law and father-in-law kept repeating the same thing.
Do you intend to repay kindness with ingratitude? What are you talking about? Have you forgotten? How we helped your family's tea shop.
Indeed, it might be said that my family's shop was saved from bankruptcy because the contract with the hotel continued. But that hotel went bankrupt a few years after I got married. So, it was just that level of a contract. In short, it's uncertain whether my family's tea shop would have gone bankrupt without the hotel's contract. Moreover, they were likely planning to drive the tea shop to bankruptcy depending on my response. Now that they've brought this up, all I can say is that it puts me in a difficult position. Besides, I believe I've repaid that favor with my unpaid work, including the subsequent support. That's why I declared to my mother-in-law.
Anyway, we're divorced now, so no matter what you say, I won't be sending any more money. You'll remember this.
With those words as her last, she hung up the phone with a click. Since then, there have been no more calls from my in-laws.
This settles it. Now I just need to push Jonas a bit further,
I thought, smirking as I awaited the right moment. Meanwhile, I proceeded with the divorce formalities. To avoid meeting Jonas directly, I had a lawyer handle the alimony discussions. Surprisingly, the process went smoothly. Apparently because Jonas was quite downcast. But I wasn't about to forgive him just for this. How did he manage to arrange the money? It seemed he borrowed from someone, but that was no longer my concern. As the day I had eagerly awaited arrived, I headed to Jonas's workplace, feeling jittery. As the day I had eagerly awaited arrived, I headed to a place. It was Jonas's workplace, feeling jittery. While I was talking at the reception, Jonas came out. Seeing me, he raised his voice.
What are you doing here, Mirabelle? I've got some business to attend to. Are you still planning to cause me trouble?
Ignoring everyone around, Jonas continued to shout. Having you here is just a nuisance in such a big company. You're better suited to a poor, small tea shop. He hurled those words at me. I just listened in silence. Employees around us started to calm Jonas down. But then, Jonas began saying this to everyone around.
This woman is my ex-wife, a bringer of bad luck. Because of her, my family's hotel went bankrupt.
If she stays here, this company will go bankrupt too. She should be kicked out immediately. That's how shamelessly Jonas was spreading the word. As I wondered what to do, a loud voice echoed.
What's all this commotion about? My ex-wife came here to disrupt our business.
I'll send her away right now. Jonas cowered. Ex-wife? The man called manager turned his gaze towards me.
You're already here, Ms. Evans?
Evans is my maiden name. After divorcing Jonas, I had reverted to my maiden name.
I was called here, but this treatment is a bit.
I showed my displeasure. Immediately, Manager West's expression changed. He turned back to Jonas, beginning to scold him fiercely.
Hey, Manson! Enough is enough. How dare you treat an important guest like this? Guest? But she's my ex-wife. She's an important client. Client? The tea shop lady?
Jonas was dumbfounded. Manager dragged him away somewhere. A few minutes later, Jonas returned with a pale face. Manager West was also there.
You're a company executive, what's that all about?
It seemed Jonas had finally grasped the situation. Actually, I was there for a business discussion with Jonas's company. My company deals with antibacterial materials made using catechins, like towels, among other things. We also sell sweets made with tea. I came for discussions related to these products. Jonas's company had shown interest in antibacterial towels. They were planning to use them as amenities in hotels they supply.
When did you start a company? Right after the hotel went bankrupt. When I started placing my homemade sweets in the shop.
After the hotel's bankruptcy, I began efforts to increase my family's shop sales. One of these efforts was diversifying our products, including tea-related items. The first was my homemade sweets. Initially, it was more for promotion than as a product. But they became unexpectedly popular, and a woman suggested commercializing them. That led to starting the confectionery business, which became a hit as a souvenir. Then I ventured into further product development, utilizing the catechins found in tea. While similar products were already on the market, having connections from my time working at the hotel gave me an edge. Similar products were already on the market. However, I had connections from my time working at the hotel, which gave me an edge. I thought there might be demand for these as amenities.
Because it was successful, I officially established a corporation.
This was our first business discussion.
Why didn't you tell me?
There was no need to tell you, we're divorced.
That is.
Well, good luck with your work, I said to Jonas and headed to the company's reception room with Manager West. Afterward, the business discussion with Manager West concluded successfully. I secured a satisfying contract. I crossed paths with Jonas a few times at the company. But he quickly averted his eyes. Apparently feeling quite awkward, he quit his job a few months later. According to a colleague, he started working part-time at a construction site. A job that seemed quite tough, leaving him worn out every day. Hearing this made me feel a sense of relief. My revenge was complete. One day, I received a call from President Norman.
My daughter always causes you trouble, doesn't she?
Not at all, Sarah is doing great running the business. In fact, it was Sarah, Norman's daughter, who had suggested commercializing my sweets. After graduating high school, Sarah helped with her father's business and worked at a hotel. During that time, she visited me. She saw the sweets, felt a sense of nostalgia. I'll take charge as president, let's commercialize it. Of course, I thought it was just casual child's talk at first. But Sarah wasn't a child anymore. Taking after President Norman, she made some moves on other fronts. And before I knew it, she had incorporated the business. That company is where I work now, selling sweets made with tea. So I thought President Norman was worried about Sarah and contacted me. But as we talked, I realized that wasn't the case.
Actually, a guy I know tried to sell me your company's products.
Oh?
The sweets or the catechin materials?
The catechin materials. He was suggesting we use them as amenities in hotels. I was completely confused. After all, Sarah had already pitched them to President Norman. Why would it happen like this? President Norman explained the situation to me when I asked. It turns out a man had bought the rights to the product from someone. However, the sellers were none other than my former in-laws. It was a part of a premeditated scam. After hearing about me from Jonas, they plotted this fraud.
Because it's my daughter's company, I immediately knew it was a scam, he said. I see. It seems they've been caught, but depending on your response, they were willing to settle things quietly.
It appeared that if I showed leniency towards my former in-laws, they would let it slide. But there was no way I was going to do that. I replied with a smile.
Please turn them over to the police.
After hearing my response, President Norman ended the call. Later on, my former in-laws were arrested for fraud. They claimed until the end that I was involved. Of course, the police inquired about it. But my response was as you would expect.
It's true they are my former in-laws, but this act was out of spite against me. I had no involvement.
Ultimately, it seems that this single statement made my former in-laws come to terms with the situation. They are now complying honestly with the investigation. They might end up with probation or some form of criminal penalty. Even so, I hope they reflect deeply on their actions. Meanwhile, I'm busy with my days.
I never thought that products made with tea would become this popular.
However, I have one goal now. To attend Sarah's wedding. And make sweets for her. Jonas and I never had children. So I can't help but dote on Sarah as if she were my own. That aside, I haven't given up on remarrying. If the opportunity arises, I'd love to remarry. Especially to someone who appreciates tea-based sweets. That goes without saying.